Welcome to today's 5-minute Bible study in the book of James. We're in James chapter 1. Yesterday we started looking at verse 2. And we noticed that James says to consider it joy when you undergo trials or times of testing. Now I mentioned that strikes us as a little strange because time of testing, time of trial is not usually considered enjoyable. And that's not what James meant. Rather, he said, consider it joy because of what the consequence will be. Because out of your trials, out of testing, your faith can grow and develop and get stronger. And that is a good thing. The trial itself is not necessarily good. The testing is a difficult moment, but your faith will grow because you're in Christ. And that is a good thing. So let's look at this some more and see some detail how he explains how this occurs. So we'll start reading at verse 2. Consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials or testings of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Now, let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and may be complete, not lacking anything. Wow. He says, when you go through a time of trial, a time of testing, in the various kinds of trials and testings, you know that, but you rejoice in that, not that the testing time is of itself a positive, but the consequence is that your faith will grow. Your faith will learn to endure and persevere. You know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And one of the valuable qualities of a life of faith is that holding on, standing fast, enduring, persevering in faith. You know, you never know in truth how strong your faith is until it goes through a time of testing, and then you see that faith holds you in the deepest storms of life, and in the hardest times it brings you through. This is the kind of perseverance we're talking about, that standing fast in the faith even when the storms are raging against you. You know, even in the midst of the storm, we find that Christ holds us, and that perseverance of faith grows us into maturity. We become complete, we become mature, not lacking anything. Now, we all realize, we all know it's no fun. It's not fun at all when you go through a difficult time, when you're tested, when you're tried. But we also know on the other side, our faith proves itself to be reliable, and it brings us through. Very similar to the time on the Sea of Galilee when the storm was raging, and Jesus simply spoke to the storm and said, "Peace, be still." And the disciples realized that he was the Lord of the waves, he was the Lord of the storm, he holds authority over it all, and he brought them through. And likewise for us, when the storms are raging, we learn to endure in our faith and to hold on and to persevere. And ultimately we will find that Jesus speaks that word of peace. Peace, be still. And that persevering of faith, that standing fast in the faith, grows us and helps us develop maturity in the faith. Now, James goes on. Out of this persevering faith comes the ability to ask God for what you need. So he says, if any of you lacks wisdom, and you ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea blown and tossed about by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded, unstable in all they do. Now, one of the things we discover in the times of persevering faith that comes when we go through trials is we learn the power of prayer. And we learn that God hears us and answers us. And we come to realize that when we ask for what we need, he supplies. That happens to us when we're tested. Our faith is tested and it grows. And in that growing, we realize we can ask God for what we need and he will supply it. If we need wisdom, we ask. He gives what we need. So the author of James calls us to an audacious faith because it's a faith that has been tested that has persevered and has now learned the power of prayer, of petition, and of intercession. All that comes about, and that is what should be considered pure joy, says James. Now, in tomorrow's session, I want to talk a little bit more about that asking in faith that he talks about, so that you might receive from the Lord as you ask. We'll talk about that tomorrow. So join us next time for our 5-minute Bible study in the book of James.